Okay, I know last time I said that the next video would be finishing the hood panels and starting on the doors, but yeah, plans change. Those doors will have to wait. These hood panels are being a little more problematic than I thought. The top two panels aren't too bad. As you can see, I got those setting up here. I got the hinge in place. Now with the hinge, they have you take a hot tool like a soldering iron and melt and press those tabs down that make like a rivet. I recommend when you do that, put a piece of aluminum foil on it and then put the soldering iron on top of that. That will prevent the plastic from sticking to the soldering iron and burning and making a mess. You just get a much neater, cleaner job if you do it that way first. As you can see, I also have the hinges bonded on this side, and same thing, you just melt and kind of press that down to lock the hinges in. I also put some CA glue underneath of it just for some more support, because even if that melted down, it was still wiggled a little bit. So I just locked them in place with the CA. When you do that, use the extra thick or the gap filling CA. That way it won't migrate up into the hinge and glue your hinge joint shut. You can see I had to add some plastic, some styrene to the front lips of those. That still needs to be trimmed up and cleaned up to match that side. And with these in place, as we said, the front isn't too bad. It's definitely much better than it was. There's just barely a little bit of a ridge here. I could possibly get a little bit more shaved off, but I don't know, I'm going to leave that for now. The side panel over here, let me just spin this around this way, like so. That side panel is not too bad when that goes in place here. Let me get that in here. It won't be in the hinges, but that one fits okay. That one's not too bad. There is a large gap right up here. I think I'll fix that by adding in to the body panel, not the hood panel. But that side fits pretty well. Now, as you can see, I had to add a little bit of material on this aft part here, because the rail where that sits right here isn't perfectly flat. It's got a little bit of a bow to it. So I just put that in to fill in the gap at the bottom. Of course, with the fenders on, that won't even be seen at all. Now, for these hinges here, what I did, let me show you this panel better. Come on, get in there. Is that going to focus? As you can see, I shaved out a little bit of a pocket here. Come on, focus. I don't know how well you can see that. I shaved out a little bit of a pocket there just so the hinge will kind of sit recessed into here. And what that did was that brings the panel inwards quite a bit, because the way it was, they stuck out just a little bit too far. And I just shaved all that down so the hinge, in fact, let me get one of these hinges right here, because these hinges would set in this way. Maybe it'll focus on that a little bit better. So that hinge area sits in that little pocket. Man, I wish that would focus better. And again, that brings the whole panel inward towards the other hood panel a little bit. Because like I said, otherwise they just stuck out way too far. And let me get the other, that's right here. If we look at the other one, I'll have to do the same thing to that. As you can see, there's actually a shoulder. There's actually a shoulder on that that pushes the hinge in a bit, which pushes the panel out. So if I just put this on as is, it sticks out the whole thickness of that panel. So by shaving that shoulder down and by shaving in a pocket for the hinge to fit in, it pulls the whole thing in flush and just looks a lot nicer. As you can see, I also bonded in some brass square stock just to stiffen up that edge, because that edge was just too, and it had a bow and it had a weird warp in it. And you can also see I added some material to that edge, because let me show you what's going on with this panel. This panel is going to be the pain in the rear. I know I've said that with every panel so far, but that right side panel, spin this around, let me show you what it's doing. If we try to set this in place, and the hood panel is on square and centered, but if we put this in like so, right, you can see why I had to add that little bit on the front, because it was too short. But look at that gap right there. It's at about 1/4 inch at least. At that scale, that's like a 2-inch gap. So yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly what to do with that. Now, if I just rotate this whole panel up to match it, well, that puts the gap at the bottom, which would be easier to fill, but then none of these shapes here where the exhaust pipes come out will line up. Maybe I could fudge those. Maybe I could just match it up here. Of course, that puts a gap in the back, that changes the gap in the front, but I would have to shave and add off to those edges, which might be easier than filling in that gap right there in the corner up here. I don't know why I had to point that out. I mean, you guys can see that. So I don't know. I got to think about this a little bit more. Yeah, that's just that's terrible. But I'll make it work. I'll get it. The only thing is, that's going to put off working on the doors a little bit longer. So maybe next video, all 4 hood panels will be in place, and then we can start the doors. But you know, this whole thing, I mean, I know it's a Pocher model. Pocher models are known for not fitting parts very well. But let me just show you some other problems I'm having. When we look at this, the center line here is not perfectly vertical. I don't know how well you can see that from the video or not, but it's not perfectly vertical. And I have tried and tried and tried to make it straight. And I'm not quite sure how. I measured the distance here, this rod here, and it is perfect, maybe within a couple thousandths, to this one over here, to this rod right over here. In order for this to lean over the 1/16 of an inch that it needs to go, it almost seems like those rods have to be bent to kind of bend it to kick it over. Again, it's not going to take much, only like I said, about a 1/16 of an inch to make that vertical. But if I do that, then what's that going to do to the fit of the hoods that I just finished? So I don't really know if it would be noticeable. I don't really know if I want to take all of this back apart again. And if I do tweak that over, that may affect the fit of the fenders. It's like everything affects everything else here. So what I may do is take this piece off, which this is easy. You just take, you know, this little piece right here comes off, and then there's a screw, one screw at the very bottom, and then this piece here comes right off. It's the plastic part here, the radiator. That would be more of a problem. Where these rods go through, there's nuts on each side. Maybe it wouldn't be as hard of a problem as I'm imagining. Maybe I'll try that. The only thing that concerns me, it seems like every time I take these hood panels off and just rest them back on, seems like every time I do that, the little, you know, the way they fit here is just slightly different every time. You know, sometimes it's a little bit higher, sometimes a little bit lower. So if I go tweaking, if I go changing this, I'm really concerned what that'll do to the rest here. So I'm kind of debating the best course of action here. I really don't think, let me see what it looks like on camera, looking at it this way. I I don't really think, trying to get everything centered, the cap on the top of the radiator centered up with the center of the body there, doesn't look too bad. Maybe it's just me trying to make it too perfect, which might not be that possible with one of these kits. But even if I did tweak that over the 1/16 of an inch it needs to go, and that pushes these hood panels over just a tiny, tiny bit, that still will not close up that gap I'm having here. That still won't fix that gap. Wouldn't be enough. So I'll keep messing around with the hood panels, and when those are done, I'll show you what those look like, and then we'll get started on the doors. So yeah, let me get back to you after a few more days worth of work on these panels. Until then, please enjoy this photo of our cat. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I couldn't help it. So anyways, looking at this panel, I've got it fitted, I think, as well as I'm going to be able to get it fitted. I could probably tweak it here or there a tiny bit, but as you can tell, I only filled in a little bit of a gap up here. The majority of the gap got filled in down here. What I decided to do was, before I got too carried away with trying to fix it, I just hung it on the hinges, and again, there's a hinge about here inside and another one about here. So I hung it on the hinges, I put it up there, and just to see what it looked like, and it wasn't as bad as I expected being hung from the hinges. So again, I could have left this down, meaning this edge would have been all the way down, and filled in that gap and just reworked how the hinges were fitted. But I was afraid if I did that, then the lines made by the grills here would be tipped this way. I'm exaggerating here just a little bit. But then those grill lines would not have been parallel with the hood line. So by attaching it to the hinges where it should be, raising this corner up, now the grill lines are parallel with the hinge lines, and I just thought that would be the best way to do it. So doing that, I had to fill in here. Basically, I bonded on strips of styrene with solvent, and I had to fill in here. This didn't really need any here. I could put, so there's a little bit of a gap. I could put a strip here, a little bit here. Well, everywhere there's white. I added some plastic here. You may remember that I had a really thick layer on the front. Well, I had to sand most of that off. I had to remove most of that. And there's just a tiny sliver here I had to put in. That's still not quite right. I still need to, I need to work that just a little bit more. So these openings had to be shifted back. So I added on the front and I removed material here. And again here, I added on the front and removed material here so they would fit in here properly. So next step for this is to, fix this, sand that a little bit straighter. But I need to get these side panels into primer. The other side panel fits pretty decently now. So both side panels into primer, and then permanently mounted onto the hinges with the hot iron, and to have those permanently mounted onto the hinges here. And then this should be done minus final paint. Now there are a few little areas that are still bothering me just a little bit. The front edge here, and I can push them down into place easily enough, but those aren't perfect. The back edges here are not perfect. That's just thick enough that pushes down. So I can push those down easily enough. I'm thinking that when I put the hold down parts here, there's little metal clips that go into the hole here to hold this down, and there's another one right here to hold that down. I'm going to wait and see if those hold down clips pull that down, which will then pull this down. If they don't, my option here is to add in just a little bit of styrene here on this part, and then sand that to ferret into these hood panels. And I know in the video that looks bad, but you know, this whole thing just floats and flops around here. I could add material here and sand it to match that shape. I don't know if it bothers me enough to go to that trouble or not. When I look at other builds online, when I look at other images of this model built, this, you know, it's better than most. I mean, I'm not trying to put down anybody's work by any means. I have definitely seen some that are better than this. A lot of guys building these Pochers, they managed to get these hoods to fit and match perfectly. I think a lot of those guys built the panels from scratch though, which is an option. I just really would rather spend my time doing other things. So if I can get this better than most, acceptable, then I think it'll be good enough. We'll see if it still bothers me once I get everything in final paint, or primed at least. So again, I'm going to, as far as the video series here goes, I'm going to be done with these as far as the videos go. Again, I'm going to tweak them a bit, prime them, attach them. But as far as the video series goes, the next step is going to be to start on the doors. So, in an attempt to try to keep this video, or this part, what are we, part 4 now? Already lost track. In order to keep this one from becoming too long, I'm going to end it here. So hopefully my next video, next week or the week after maybe, we'll see how it goes, week and a half or so, we'll have some progress on the doors there. So again, as always, thanks for watching.